The Young and the Restless spoilers. Sienna and Noah found themselves trapped in a nightmare that seemed to grow darker with each passing hour, a relentless maze of fear, adrenaline and uncertainty that neither of them had ever imagined facing. The chaos surrounding them wasn't simply a situation spiraling out of control, but a suffocating storm engineered by a man whose mind had long since slipped past the boundary of sanity. Matt's obsession had twisted into a vicious hunger for destruction, and the moment he set his sights on Noah and Sienna, they were marked as prey in a game with no rules and no mercy. Everywhere they ran, every shadow they turned toward, felt like it carried his presence, an invisible threat breathing down their necks, feeding on their panic, tightening around them like a net they could not break free from. They had tried to hide, to rationalize, to hope that Matt's rage would burn out on its own, but hope was useless against someone who had nothing left to lose, someone who had chosen violence as his only language. What made their situation even more horrifying was the betrayal hidden beneath it all, a betrayal disguised behind a badge and a promise of protection. Noah had always believed Detective Barrow was one of the few people left in this mess who could be trusted. Someone who might see the truth behind Matt's behavior and intervene before tragedy struck. But in a twisted, sickening revelation, the mask fell, exposing Barrow as an ally to the very man Noah and Sienna had been running from. The realization hit Noah like a blow to the chest. They had been confiding in a predator, not a protector. Flashbacks of Barrow's reassuring words, his calm voice, his apparent concern, all of it replayed in Noah's mind with a poison now attached to every memory. Barrow had never been on their side. He had been studying them, tracking them, waiting for the perfect moment to corner Noah when the odds were stacked against him. And when that moment came, the result was catastrophic. In that narrow, grim alleyway, surrounded by cold brick walls and the smell of rain-soaked asphalt, Noah's world had collapsed into a blur of fists, shouts, and helplessness. Matt's rage had erupted with full force, and Barrow stood beside him like a silent executioner, offering no hesitation, no moral dilemma, only obedience. Noah barely remembered how many times he was struck or how hard his body crashed against the pavement. His consciousness had slipped away in pieces, the world fading into a suffocating black void. The last thing he heard was Matt's voice, calm, terrifyingly calm, promising that this was only the beginning. A warning, not a killing. A message meant to rattle him to the core. After that, nothing existed. Noah's body shut down, collapsing into unconsciousness, leaving him defenseless and alone in a place where anything could have happened to him. But fate, or something far more instinctive, intervened in the form of Sienna. Even before she received a call or heard any news, something in her heart seized with a dread she couldn't explain. It wasn't logic, it wasn't evidence. It was pure intuition, a visceral fear that Noah was in danger. She felt it pull her like a current, urging her to move, to run, to trust the silent alarm screaming inside her. And she did. She didn't think twice. Her feet carried her faster than her mind could process, her breath sharp and heavy as she followed nothing but fear and instinct. When she turned into that alley, the sight that greeted her broke her heart and ignited a fire inside her all at once. Noah lying unconscious on the hard ground, motionless, cold, his face pale beneath the dim streetlight. In that moment, time lost its rhythm. Nothing existed but Noah and the terrifying possibility that she had been too late. Sienna dropped to her knees beside him, her hands shaking as she grabbed his shoulders, calling his name over and over. Her voice trembled, cracking with each plea. She begged him to wake up, her fear rising with every second of silence. She tried to shake him gently at first, but the panic took over, and soon she was gripping him tightly, desperate to pull him back into the world. Tears spilled down her face as the terror inside her grew, terror that she might lose him, that Matt and Barrow had taken from her someone she wasn't ready to live without. Her tears fell onto Noah's skin, her cries echoing off the walls, raw and uncontrollable. She pressed her forehead against his chest, pleading with the universe, with anything, to give him back to her. Then, just when hope began slipping through her fingers, Noah's eyelids twitched. His breathing stuttered. A faint, broken sound escaped him as consciousness clawed its way back. Sienna gasped, lifting her head sharply, her hands cupping his face as if she were afraid he might fade again. When his eyes finally opened, unfocused and dazed, she let out a sob of relief. Noah blinked, confusion clouding his expression as he looked at her, as if he couldn't tell whether she was real or part of some dream. For a moment, he believed he was dead, that this softness, this warmth of her touch, was something beyond life. It took time for reality to settle in, for him to understand that he was alive, that she was there, and that she had saved him. Gradually, the horror of what happened returned to him. Noah's voice trembled as he told Sienna the truth. That Matt had been the one to kidnap him, dragging him into the alley with every intention of sending a message rather than ending his life. Noah's body shuddered as he recounted the cold precision in Matt's actions, the terrifying control behind his madness. Matt could have killed him. Barrow could have finished the job. But they didn't. Instead, they let him live so he could carry the fear with him, so he would know that there was nowhere safe left to run. It was a warning carved into his mind, a promise that the next time, they wouldn't hold back. Sienna listened with a mix of sorrow, fury, and determination burning in her chest. She understood now that they weren't dealing with impulsive violence or emotional instability, they were facing a coordinated threat, a calculated hunt orchestrated by two men who had crossed every moral line. The danger wasn't over. It was only escalating. But as she held Noah, helping him sit up, steadying his shaking hands, something inside her shifted. Fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She wasn't going to let Matt dictate their fate. She wasn't going to let Barrow hide behind a badge while hunting them like animals. She wasn't going to run blindly anymore. Noah felt it too, that shift, that fire that ignited when Sienna looked at him with a resolve far stronger than any fear. He realized that even though Matt had tried to break him, even though the betrayal had shaken him to his core, he wasn't alone anymore. Sienna had chosen to face the nightmare with him, and that alone anchored him, gave him enough strength to breathe, to focus, to keep moving forward. The terror of the alley still clung to him, but Sienna's presence grounded him, reminding him that survival wasn't just about escaping, it was about fighting back, refusing to be controlled by fear. Together, they rose from the cold ground, battered but not broken, shaken but not defeated. And though the alleyway remained drenched in the memory of trauma, Noah and Sienna stepped away from it with a new understanding. Matt's warning may have been meant to intimidate them, to crush their hope, but instead it awakened something far more dangerous than fear. It awakened resolve. It awakened courage. It awakened the kind of defiance that grows in people who have nothing left to lose except each other. Sienna reached her breaking point, that fragile but deadly line between fear and fury where something inside a person finally snaps and can never return to what it once was. For weeks, no, months, she had lived in a state of constant dread, always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for Matt's shadow to reappear and consume her life all over again. She had tried to rationalize it, tried to convince herself that one more day of patience, one more hour of endurance, one more attempt to run or hide might buy them time. But time had only made Matt bolder. It had only made the threats sharper, the danger closer, and the pain deeper. And as she looked at Noah lying bruised and terrified in her arms, something inside her shattered with a soundless violence. Something that had been straining to hold on finally gave way, letting a surge of anger rise like a tidal wave that drowned out any whisper of fear left inside her. She stood there trembling, not from terror but from the sheer force of the rage flooding every vein in her body. Panic had been replaced by a burning clarity. She realized that if they continued to live like this, running, hiding, trembling at every unexpected sound, they would never know peace again. Fear would become their home, and Matt would always be the monster lurking in every corner. It didn't matter where they went or how far they tried to escape, as long as Matt lived, he would continue to stalk their lives like a curse they could never shake. Sienna could no longer pretend that survival alone was enough. She wanted freedom, real freedom, and she understood with chilling certainty that freedom could only come from ending the nightmare once and for all. The hatred she felt for Matt wasn't a recent wound, nor was it born from a single moment. It was the accumulation of years of manipulation, cruelty, and betrayal. Matt had once been her husband, a title that made her stomach twist in disgust now, but even then, he had never been a partner. He had been a tormentor wrapped in the disguise of affection, a man who fed on control until there was nothing left of her but fear. She had escaped him physically, but the ghost of his influence had followed her like a chain she couldn't cut. And now, after everything he had done, after he had hurt Noah, after he had stalked her life through shadow and violence, Sienna realized that she didn't just want Matt gone. She wanted him erased. She wanted him to pay with the same brutality he had inflicted, to feel, even for a second, the terror he had carved into her soul. Her hands were shaking as she held the gun, but it wasn't the trembling of hesitation, it was adrenaline flooding her system with the force of 1,000 storms. Noah saw her expression and felt a mix of awe and fear, because the woman standing in front of him no longer looked like someone fleeing danger. She looked like someone who had become danger. Her eyes were burning with something fierce, something raw, something that had been growing quietly inside her all along. She had always been stronger than she believed, but now her strength had taken shape in the most terrifying form possible. Sienna didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any scream. Her breathing slowed, steadied, sharpened into a chilling calm as she stared at Matt. He stood only a few meters away, arrogant, certain he still held control over both of them. He didn't understand yet that the power he had fed on for so long had shifted. The fear that had once belonged to Sienna had turned into a weapon, and every step she took forward transferred the weight of that power onto her. Matt smirked, taunting her, believing, as he always had, that she would never dare pull the trigger. That she was weak. That she was nothing without his manipulation. That she was still the girl who cried in silence while he shattered her piece by piece. But that girl was gone. The woman standing in front of him was someone he helped create but would never be able to control again. Sienna lifted the gun, her hand steady now, her eyes locked on his chest. Time slowed. Noah held his breath, feeling the tension stretch so tightly that it could snap at any moment. Matt's smirk faltered as he finally recognized the look in her eyes, the look of someone who no longer feared consequences. Someone who had accepted what she needed to do. And then, without warning, without hesitation, without a single tremor of doubt, Sienna squeezed the trigger. The gunshot tore through the alley, echoing like thunder against the cold brick walls. Matt staggered backward as the bullet struck him directly in the chest, his eyes widening in shock, his breath catching in a violent gasp. For the first time, he felt the vulnerability he had forced onto others, the undeniable realization that he was no longer invincible. His hand pressed against the spreading bloom of red on his shirt, his body collapsing to the ground with a sound that felt heavier than any fall Sienna had ever heard. Silence followed. A thick, suffocating silence that wrapped around them, pulsing with disbelief and adrenaline. Sienna stood frozen, the gun still raised, her chest rising and falling as she stared at Matt's unmoving body. 1,000 emotions collided inside her, relief, terror, empowerment, shock. She had done it. She had finally severed the chain he had kept wrapped around her. But as she stood there, unable to tear her eyes away from him, another emotion crawled into her mind, doubt. Had she killed him? Could it really be that simple? Noah, still weakened but conscious enough to sense danger, struggled to pull himself closer to her. He looked at Matt's body, then back at Sienna. He wanted to comfort her, but he also knew something was wrong, terrifyingly wrong. Matt had been violent, cruel, calculating. Men like him didn't die easily. They didn't just fall and fade into nothing. Matt was the kind of monster who clung to life out of spite alone, who forced his way back from the brink simply to make others suffer. Sienna lowered the gun slowly, her breaths trembling again as she watched for any sign of movement. She wanted to believe it was over, that she had freed herself and Noah from the torment that had haunted them. But deep inside her, a quiet voice whispered a warning, not yet. Not so easy. Not for a man whose soul had long since sunk into darkness. Matt's fingers twitched. Barely, but unmistakably. A chill ran down Sienna's spine. Noah saw it too, his eyes widening, his heart lurching with dread. Matt's chest rose in a shallow, ragged breath. Blood still dripped from the wound, but his body refused to surrender. His eyes flickered open, filled with a cold, murderous fire that made Sienna's blood turn to ice. He wasn't dead. He wasn't even close. And the nightmare wasn't over, not yet.